Title: Flight 1313. The night was moonless, the sky a vast expanse of impenetrable darkness. In the heart of this void, Flight 1313 cut through the air like a sleek blade. The aircraft, a red-eye flight bound for New York, carried its payload of weary passengers towards their destinations, blissfully unaware of the nightmare that awaited them. Among the passengers was Anna, a young woman traveling alone. She glanced out of the window, her eyes reflecting the dim glow of the cabin lights. The plane's engines droned on, their monotonous hum drowning out the murmurs of conversation from her fellow travelers. As Anna settled into her seat, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over her. It was as if a shadow lurked just beyond the edge of her consciousness, waiting to pounce. Brushing off the sensation as mere nerves, she closed her eyes, hoping to drift off into sleep. But sleep eluded her. Minutes turned to hours, and still Anna found herself wide awake, her mind racing with thoughts of impending doom. She tried to distract herself with a book, but the words seemed to blur together on the page. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. Suddenly, a chill ran down Anna's spine as she noticed a figure standing in the aisle. It was a flight attendant, clad in the standard uniform of dark blue with a forced smile plastered across her face. But there was something off about her demeanor, something unsettling. "Excuse me, miss," the flight attendant said, her voice unnaturally hollow. "Would you like anything to drink?" Anna hesitated, her gaze locked with the attendant's empty eyes. No, thank you. I'm fine." The flight attendant nodded, her smile never faltering, before gliding down the aisle towards the next passenger. Anna watched her go, a sense of dread gnawing at her insides. As the hours dragged on, Anna's sense of unease only grew stronger. The cabin seemed to grow colder, the air thick with an oppressive silence. She glanced around at her fellow passengers, but they were all lost in their own little worlds, oblivious to the creeping sense of dread that hung over them like a shroud. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life, causing Anna to jump in her seat. A voice, distorted and scratchy, echoed through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking," the voice said. "We are currently experiencing some minor turbulence, but there's no need to be alarmed. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until further notice." Anna gripped the armrest tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. Turbulence was normal on flights, she knew that, but there was something about the captain's voice that sent shivers down her spine. As the plane continued to lurch and sway, Anna's anxiety reached a fever pitch. She could feel the eyes of her fellow passengers boring into her, their silent judgment weighing heavily upon her. She wanted to scream, to run, to escape this nightmare, but there was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the turbulence ceased. The plane leveled out, the cabin returning to an eerie calm. Anna let out a shaky breath, her knuckles white from gripping the armrest so tightly. But her relief was short-lived. Without warning, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the cabin into darkness. Panic erupted among the passengers, their cries of fear mingling with the sound of rushing wind outside. Anna's heart hammered in her chest as she fumbled for her phone, the only source of light in the pitch-black cabin. As she illuminated the small space around her, she saw that the other passengers were just as terrified as she was, their faces contorted with fear. And then, just as suddenly as they had gone out, the lights flickered back to life, bathing the cabin in a harsh fluorescent glow. Anna blinked against the sudden brightness, her eyes struggling to adjust. But as her vision cleared, she realized with horror that something was horribly wrong. The other passengers were gone. The seats were empty, the overhead bins gaping open like hungry mouths. There was no sign of the flight attendant or the captain, no sound except for the low hum of the engines. Anna's breath caught in her throat as she stumbled out of her seat, her mind reeling with disbelief. Where had everyone gone? Had they all vanished into thin air? Frantic, she made her way to the front of the plane, her footsteps echoing in the empty cabin. She pushed open the door to the cockpit and froze in horror at the sight that greeted her. The cockpit was empty, the controls unmanned. The windows were dark, offering no glimpse of the world outside. It was as if the plane was adrift in a void, lost to the reaches of space and time. Panic clawed at Anna's chest as she stumbled back into the cabin, her mind racing with possibilities. Had she fallen asleep and dreamed the whole thing? Was she trapped in some kind of twisted nightmare? But then she saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the cabin, shrouded in darkness. Anna's blood ran cold as she stared at the shadowy figure, her heart pounding in her ears. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. And then, with a suddenness that took her breath away, the figure stepped forward into the light. It was the flight attendant, her features twisted into a grotesque parody of a smile. But it was her eyes that chilled Anna to the bone, eyes devoid of any trace of humanity. "Welcome to Flight 1313, the flight attendant said, her voice a low, guttural growl. "We hope you enjoy your stay." With a horrifying realization, Anna understood. She was not alone on this plane. She was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. As the realization dawned on her, Anna's fear gave way to a primal instinct for survival. She turned and ran, her footsteps echoing in the empty cabin as she fled towards the emergency exit. But as she reached for the handle, she felt a cold hand close around her wrist, pulling her back. Anna screamed as she was dragged into the darkness, her voice lost in the howl of the wind. And then, with a deafening roar, the plane plummeted into the abyss, vanishing without a trace. And somewhere, in the depths of the darkness, Flight 1313 continued its endless journey, its passengers doomed to wander its haunted halls for all eternity.